Shalom, friends. You know, sometimes IQ and intelligence is highly overrated. I mean, where can we find someone that has what we call common sense? And it has been said many times that common sense is not common at all. But what we consider common sense is really, in a sense, the highest form of intelligence. So enough of sophistry and sophistication and convoluted. Simple stuff is really, really effective. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it doesn't work. I'll tell you actually a cute story that happened. The germ of the story is true, though I don't know the details, so I'm filling it in. There was a girl in Borough Park, very religious neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. Her name was Miriam, and she had a difficult upbringing. She was brought up by a single mother. She was observant, but because she didn't have a dad, so her family was not well known, and it wasn't easy growing up religious in an environment where there are children and all over the place, and everyone is always Mr. or Mrs. or Rabbi or Rebbitzin. Anyway, a lovely girl, but it seems that the marriage, the shadchanim, what do you call them, the marriage makers, they seem to overlook her. So here she is. If you're not religious, you go out and you go to a bar. You wait for someone to proposition you, and then you decide whether you want to say hi or no. Or you meet a person in the street. But in a religious community, it goes through a matchmaker. And the matchmakers were not knocking on her door. So her friends, she's growing older. She's in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, and desperate times need desperate measures. So she asks her friend who says, you know what, why don't you go to some of the weddings? Just about every night in Borough Park, especially during the summer times, there's maybe 2-3 weddings. At every one of these weddings, besides the family, there are matchmakers. And that's their job. They go to a wedding, they meet people, they scout, and a lot of good matches are made from it. So why don't you go? No one's going to ask you who you're from, because you could always say, I'm from the groom side. So just be there, become more prominent. Well, it wasn't the most pleasant, because she has to wait to be noticed, but she's an attractive girl, so she decided she would do that. The only thing is, if she wants to go to 2 or 3 weddings per night, she's not going to take a bus. She's all dressed up fancy. So they have what is called a car service, or like a Uber. It was a car service. So she called up a religious car service. She didn't want to take any chances. So she wanted a religious car service. She says, I'd like to hire a driver for the night, for between the 8 and 11. And his job will be to drive me to one hall and then wait for me. I'll go to another hall and another hall. Anyway, this went on for 3 months. Very exhausting. I don't know if she went out every night or every other night. Very exhausting. But you know what? It worked. Because you know who she marries at the end? Yeah, the cab driver. He was waiting for her, and they were talking. And he felt bad for her, and she felt bad for him. And over the 3 months, they got to know each other. So here she was, going to weddings to be noticed by matchmakers. The bottom line is that her chassan, her groom, was brought to her. She would never know it, but God brought salvation in a very simple way. And another cute story, and I'll tell you why I'm telling the stories. There was a soap factory. I don't know if this is actually true or not, but there was a soap factory. And of course, there's the bars of soap that have to go into the container, into the box. So they have this big factory producing tens of thousands of bars of soap. But they noticed that there was a fair amount of boxes that were going on this conveyor where the bar of soap didn't enter. So essentially, after it was sealed, on every batch, there was a couple of empty boxes. That's not suitable. So they called the engineer who talks to other engineers, and they come up with a brilliant solution. That basically, after the bars of soap are filled, it continues going down the conveyor belt, and it goes over a very sensitive, weight. and which measures weight. If they could tell the difference between a bar of soap and not a bar of soap, when it's very light, then it continues going down. It's a slower process, and they have a bypass. And then the empty box is recycled, and it goes back to the front. Of course, you need computers because everything has to be in sync, so the production line doesn't get messed up. Anyway, management decides to do it, and it's $1.5 million proposition, and they do it. A week later, the fellow the engineer and the people that put in the process call up the manager and say, how is it working? He says, let me go to the factory, let me go downstairs and let me check. I'll give you a status report. Because they wanted to iron out any kinks. Anyway, it's working beautifully. And he asked the people on the bottom who are doing the packaging, how many of these things are coming empty? The boxes, no, every box is filled. So he's very excited. It seemed to work. So then he goes up a couple of steps where there's the bypass, and he says to the people, how many of these boxes are actually empty that are now being recycled? He says, strange. Since a week ago, we haven't had one box that's empty. Can't figure this out because it was just installed a week ago. How is it possible that the problem was solved without this $1.5 million investment? So he goes up a little bit higher on the chain, and the boxes are coming down immediately after being filled, and he sees a fellow standing whose job is to make sure that everything is going, and right next to him is a fan. He says to him, why do you have the fan on? It's very comfortable. He says, I put on the fan and it's blowing. Anything that's empty gets blown off. So it's, the guy is thinking to himself, he spent $1.5 million to get this intricate way of fixing a problem when this simple guy thought of a very simple solution, which is, why don't you just blow? And if it's heavy, it won't blow off. And if it's empty, it will blow off. Okay. I am sure some of you could add your own simple solutions or salvations that come completely unexpected, but it's unadorned and it's really very, very clear. Common sense in a sense. So what does this have to do with Pesach? I'll tell you. If you take a look online, you will see, and I'm not exaggerating, way over 150 different types of Haggadot. There's the humanist, there's the, alternate lifestyle, there's the Hasidic, there's the Kabbalistic, there's the simple, there's the one that has this interpretation and that interpretation. It's all beautiful. You know what Pesach is all about? It's really very simple. We were slaves. We were downtrodden. We were persecuted. We thought we were forgotten by God. And God did not forget us. And He took us out of slavery and made us into a great people. And here we are, 3,300 years later, great, knowledgeable, an asset to the world, and the repository of great spiritual wealth. That's what Pesach is all about. You don't have to find deep meanings into Pesach. It talks to me. There was a time when I was the equivalent of a pagan, and God took me out. I'm not a pagan anymore. I'm not an idolater anymore. I'm not a confused person anymore. I have a path. This Pesach, use common sense. Enjoy the holiday. Eat the matzah. And you don't need an intricate interpretation. When you say, by next year in Jerusalem, that's what we mean. Literally. Almighty God, we're ready. We're ready to go to Israel. We're not talking spiritual nirvana. Physically, we're ready to leave this great country that we're in to go to the homeland of the Jewish people, where we will truly flower, truly grow, and truly be the great blessing to the world which we're meant to be. Happy Pesach and Shalom.